Hello and welcome to This Week in James City County. I'm your host, Renee Dahlman. Today we are once again doing our podcast over Zoom. And I am joined at a distance with Scott Stevens, County Administrator. Hi, Scott.
Hey, good morning, Renee.
And with Sharon Day, Director of Financial and Management Services. Hi, Sharon.
Good morning.
All right, well, we're glad you all are here. Let's go ahead, and I assume we're here to talk about the budget because it is that time of year. And Scott, I will let you take it away.
Well, Renee, I hope Sharon and I figure how to tag team while we're in different rooms. So Sharon, feel free to speak up and add to, and I'll kick it back and forth as we go through this. I will tell you, as we're doing this and as we prepared our budget, it really is a strange time of going through the coronavirus and what impact that will have on our community. And so we haven't ignored that, but as we get into our proposed budget, I do want to say we've really presented it like the coronavirus wasn't here, knowing that we're going to make some changes as we go through the process with our Board of Supervisors, and we'll talk about that later. Sharon, why don't you talk about current year a little bit and sort of what things are in place that looking at our current fiscal year and slowing down some expenditures.
Absolutely. We put really several measures in place. We have started with our P-card purchases, as well as purchase orders and capital projects, and lowering the thresholds on those. Of course, government is primarily people and infrastructure. So really the best way to conserve or control spending is through the personnel component. And we put several measures in place there, starting with our hiring freeze. We also recently had some furloughs of some part-time employees as well. And we're working in partnership with the school division. Of course, the school division makes up a little bit more than half of our budget. So we're working with them on a daily basis throughout the day, like I said, in partnership to make sure we are all doing our part to control and conserve cash. We're also looking at our capital projects. Many of those have been put on hold, at least for now, and perhaps indefinitely, just depending on how long this does continue. And on the revenue side, we've been working very closely with the Commissioner of Revenue and the Treasurer, monitoring collections and doing forecasts and projections on where we think we may be short-term and also more long-term.
Yeah, and I would just add to that with Sharon that she and I are both looking at purchases over $5,000 and $10,000, which is not our normal mode for us to be involved at that level, but we're just trying to make sure the money we're spending really is for critical needs or items for the county as opposed to just allowing our departments to purchase as they normally would. And we also have asked departments for where they're not spending money and have generated a list of over $3.5 million of funding that we can hold this year. I expect that number will grow as we push on departments a little more. But I just want our community to know we are concerned about expenses this year and what the impact it'll have on the current year. And our revenues are generally delayed, so it takes some time to really know what that will be in terms of the actuals. But we are doing everything we think is prudent to slow down our expenditures. We do have a good savings or fund balance, so I feel comfortable that the county will be in good shape getting through this year, but we really don't want to use any of that savings if we don't have to. So, Sharon, I think that's enough on current year. You ready to move into next year's budget?
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, just a high level, we do have a budget that's increasing 6%. It will go from $247 million for our FY20, and our budget year runs July 1st to June 30th. So our FY21 year, that budget number is $261.9 million. That does include JCSA, and a big part of that percentage increase is related to some projects within JCSA and some funding there where they were doing a borrowing. I do want Sharon and I to spend most of our time talking about the county's general fund because that's where our sales tax and property tax revenues go, and that is where most of our county services come from that serve the residents of James City County. And so our general fund increase is right at 2%, going from $211.8 million to $216 million for our general fund. And Sharon, if you could help me with some of the increase there. I think I know most of it, but I'll let you at least share your view of where you think our revenue increase is coming from.
Really, just for a quick recap, it's made up of two primary drivers for 4.2. There's about $2 million that's been set aside for various personnel impacts. For example, the sharing of the health insurance increase. We did have an increase in our retirement rate as well. There is a placeholder that I believe you'll discuss a little bit further down the road, but for employee compensation next year. And the other main driver is the increase in funding to the school division. The personnel component is about $2 million, and the increase to the school division is 2.2. So that's a quick way to look at it. If you add those two numbers together, you get to the 4.2.
Very good. That's a pretty good short summary, and I think that makes sense. And before I forget, and we'll say it again at the end, our budget is online. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look, we do put it out there. It's a lot of information. There's a budget message that Sharon and I put a lot of effort into sort of summarizing it, and then a lot of detail behind that. So I would certainly encourage you to go to our website if you have an interest in that, or call Renee, and she'll give her number, right, Renee?
Absolutely.
So you
Oh,
can
right
get
now.
yeah, let's give it now.
Okay, 757-272-3337.
And if you can't get online, Renee will figure out how to get the information to you so that you can see what's going on with the county's budget as well. The only thing I was going to mention in revenues, our real increasing, Sharon covered the increase in cost. Revenue-wise, it was a reassessment year for the county. That really makes up most of our increased revenues in terms of what we're looking at. There's some other smaller areas, but we did have about a 1.8% overall increase in revenue to the reassessment, and then a little bit more on top of that, just normal kind of development and growth within the community. So we are talking no tax increase. So when wonder, is there a tax rate increase? There is none of that proposed in the current year budget. We are talking about maybe some parks and rec and development fees, primarily related to stormwater and surety bond issues on the development side. But those increases, if approved, or at least as we recommended, wouldn't be implemented until January. We really wanted to get through the impact of what this coronavirus had on the community and the business side. And so we would talk about those with the board, but not to be implemented until until January of 2021. So, and we would revisit those as needed. Sharon, anything else on the revenue side we need to talk about, or expense and where we are? Does that sound, that's most of it, I think.
I think you've done a great job recapping.
Okay, very good. Well, yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about where it goes. We put a lot of graphic in our budget message. We think it's important for the community to know where the money ends up. As Sharon said earlier, of our $216 million general fund budget, 52% is the schools. $112.8 million is the schools. When you take that away, it leaves us about $103 million for the county to operate on. $54 million is people. That's our salaries and benefit for the fire, EMS, general service workers, building inspectors, those of us that are providing services to the community. And then it's about $15 million in operating, and about $34 million in outside agencies or transfer to other funds. And so the money does get broken down, but it's not, while it's a big number, when you factor what we really operate on, we operate on a fairly small number, and then personnel really, as Sharon alluded to earlier, is a big part of our operation. Sharon, any more detail on where it goes that you think we should share?
I would just add, for the piece that is transferred to other funds, probably the biggest component of that is our own debt service transfer for our capital projects. And so that is something that is a mandatory requirement. Even during the difficult times, we will make sure that we still fulfill our obligations to our creditors.
Very good. I was going to move on briefly to a sort of employee changes and just what the community knows what we're talking about. And Sharon alluded to it earlier. We have not programmed a pay increase into our budget for FY21. That was the only real change we've made at this point related to the coronavirus. We've pulled that funding aside. We have it in an area, so it's in the budget in terms of a contingency item. It's something that if the world gets back to normal pretty quickly and our revenues hold, that we would revisit the employee pay increase. It was scheduled at a 2%. To begin in January is what we've put as a placeholder, but that is not in the budget other than a placeholder for dollars, and could be used for any purpose for the county, and would take board action later in the fall to change the direction of that. We do have a slight increase in health insurance. I say slight, any increase I guess is relative to slight or not, but 5% is a relatively low increase. The county will absorb some of those costs, as Sharon had alluded to, as well as some of our employees. So some of the employees, if they have dependent coverage and some of what they pay for health insurance with the county, they would have those costs go up slightly as well. And then we did add 4 new positions. At this point, they're recommended to be added. That would be as of January 1st. And again, we would reevaluate funding and to make sure the funding's in place to support those positions as we get into later in the year as well. The other thing's not part of the budget, but still benefiting our employees that we're putting in front of our board of supervisors at the same time. We are talking about our newer employees, which we call hybrid. They're in a different retirement system. We are talking about granting them up to 4 days of sick leave per year. They currently don't have any sick leave. They do have what they call paid time off, but this would get them more comparable to our traditional employees and provide an opportunity for them in the future when they have issues related to sick leave usage. And then we are talking about all county employees going from, we have 11 holidays that are scheduled currently. Most localities in our region have 13. We have recommended moving from 11 holidays to 12, and that 12th day being a floating holiday. So employees could sort of make the choice of where they would want to be in terms of holiday. And again, that would be subject to their supervisor's approval. We wouldn't close the county down for that 12th day, but if employees wanted to be off New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve or other holidays such as that, they would have the ability to do that. So, Sharon, what about CIP? I think that's really where we ought to spend some time and talk about our CIP projects. Maybe I'll let you start off with that, and we'll tag team through some of what we see as our bigger projects maybe coming in FY21, depending on funding.
Absolutely. Our CIP is a 5-year plan. I'm going to primarily focus on the first year of that plan. That is the only year that's actually appropriated in the budget at this time. The total is about $17.7 million. That's broken down to about $10.5 million for county projects and about $7.2 in school projects. On the county side, a few of the more significant items would include some stormwater projects in the Grove and Toano area. We also have Skimino and Mill Creek watershed projects that are planned. Several projects in the public safety area. For example, we're looking to replace our computer-aided dispatch system, also known as the system, the E911 system that dispatch does use. Also, we're looking to replace some of our cardiac monitors and our record management system, which is used by the police departments, and it's how they do mobile reporting. And then in addition to those items, we have some improvements to our parks that are planned, particularly in the Chickahominy Riverfront Park. There's improvements, as well as the War Hill Sports Complex. Over on the school side, probably the more significant projects would include adding the auxiliary gym, as well as an emergency shelter at the War Hill High School. We also have some interior refurbishments that are planned for Berkeley and Toano Middle School, and also War Hill High School, and some expansions at 2 of our high schools, namely Lafayette and War Hill, and then just some general parking lot repairs and playground equipment replacement.
Very good. And I would add just a little bit to that. I do want to thank, we have a policy committee of the Planning Commission that does go through and sort of rank our CIP projects for us. And so I want to thank them for their time and effort in that. That's included within our CIP portion of our budget. So you could see their ranking of those projects. The school project, I think, Sharon, we funded most of all of their CIP requests with one significant change in that we swapped. The school system had asked for an elementary school to start design in the 21 year construction in fiscal year 22, and they had a preschool facility out in fiscal year 26, and I made the recommendation to swap those two projects. So that is my recommendation to the board. I expect we will have some conversation around the elementary school and preschool funding. That's significant items for the school board, I know, and I certainly don't want to discount their request of us for the elementary school. It's just a matter of capacity in the schools and funding for us. And again, funding is a challenge for the county. We're not in bad shape by any means, but it's a matter of the things, the projects the school system's needing, the projects that our departments and our citizens have indicated a desire for. There just isn't revenue to support that going forward. So part of my recommendation of that is trying to address the capacity need with a preschool project, which is a $22 million project versus a $29 million elementary school. Operating costs for the preschool should be somewhat less than the ongoing operating costs for elementary school. And again, we'll see where our board works through with the school board and the city in terms of ultimate school funding. And so much more conversation to come, I think, in the coming month on that. But I think Sharon did a good job summarizing our other CIP projects, and I would certainly refer you back to our budget message online and presentations that we'll give to the board, which will give a little more insight to some of the capital items. Sharon, anything else there on capital, or have we covered that well enough?
You may want to just mention some of the funding sources for our CIP. Obviously, that we have our transfers from our general fund as well as anticipated borrowings to fund those projects. We also have earmarked 100% of the historic triangle tax to fund capital projects. At the board's direction, we are using that revenue source for one-time expenditures. And so the capital projects area made a lot of sense for that. And Scott, did you want to talk a little bit about cigarette tax?
Yes, Sharon, I really do want to talk about that in terms of revenues and going forward, and just mention that in this year's budget, we had close to $11 million in requests from our departments that we just didn't have funding to do. And so Sharon and I, working with the departments, made the decision to either defer or to not fund in this year's budget. We see that in this 2-year budget kind of plan. Our first year is a budget that the board will adopt. Our second year is a plan, so we're looking forward to see what the next year looks like. And revenue continues to be a challenge in future years. And so one of those things that was opened up to counties this year by our General Assembly was the option for a cigarette tax. It can't go into effect until July of 21, so it affects our 22 budget. Currently, we would make that recommendation to our board. It's in this year's budget as just information, so it's not something they would approve this year, but it is something we have said that next year we believe they would need to implement to help. And it doesn't solve all of our issues, it just helps. And so that's a discussion we will have with the board about primarily capital projects and some ongoing operational costs. Do we continue those, or do we delay or defer, or do we raise more money? And those are the things that we really need our board and the community's input on, because we really are trying to do what the community would want us to do. And so if it is to delay those projects, that's certainly one way to balance the budget. The other would be to generate more dollars through whatever options the board has. And those are primarily, this new option with cigarette tax is one of those, but it's primarily the property tax rate that the board can influence that in fees. So more discussion on that as we get into the budget session with our board. And Sharon, you want to talk a little bit about our timeline and process with the budget? I've got some of those dates in front of me, but between you and I, we ought to be able to let the community know what's coming up over the next, what we hope is the month or so.
Absolutely. Well, of course, there's been a lot of work that's been done up to this point. We've had several meetings, starting with our pre-budget hearing back in January, and we've continued to work with the departments ever since in developing the proposed budget, which of course was just recently released. We do have our public hearing, which is the next meeting on the budget. That is scheduled for Tuesday, April the 14th at 5 p.m. And that meeting will be here at the Government Center at 101 F Mounts Bay. We also will have 2 work sessions. Both of those are scheduled on a Tuesday at 4 p.m. The first one being April the 21st, and then 1 week later on April the 28th. Ultimately, at the current time, we are scheduled to adopt the budget on Tuesday, May the 12th at 5 p.m. And again, all of those meetings are scheduled to occur here at the Government Center at 101 F Mounts Bay.
And Sharon, I would just add, provided we're still meeting in person, our April 14th meeting, I'm fairly certain the board will be in person. The other meetings or work sessions may be virtual meetings. We'll see the pleasure of the board and what they would like to do. One other meeting we have not overly publicized yet is a community meeting. We had meant for that to be at our recreation center, I think on April 23rd. We meant for that to be an in-person meeting. It will not be in person. That one, I can assure you, will be virtual, but it will be our intent to have some type of budget presentation that will follow the public hearing, that we can have that interaction with the community. So we'll have a way set up where we have a back and forth, whether that's via phone call or a FaceTime or this Zoom kind of platform. We'll work on that. But I think the other dates you have in line, we do hope to have conversations with the board throughout April with the ultimate adoption May 12th. And so we would encourage our board or community to get involved and be part of that. We have said for the April 14th meeting, and Renee is setting up lines, and so we've got some of that information out there. But if citizens were worried about coming to our boardroom, and I'm not encouraging them to come to our room. I'd rather them do it as remotely as possible. We are setting up a way where you can email in your comments, and we will share them with the board, most likely read them to the board. We can also set up a phone call where you can call in and give your 5 minutes of comment, and we will replay your voice. So it'll be your voice playing for the board, or you can come in person and we will work through social distancing and keeping us allowing a few at a time within the boardroom to make comments. So we definitely value the citizen input and want to encourage it. It's just some strange times we're in the midst of this virus, and trying to make sure we keep us all as safe as possible as we're continuing to do the community's business. So Renee, anything we've really left out that you have question-wise from Sharon and I on budget things?
I think you all have covered it. You did a great job.
Well, I just would follow back up for me on the coronavirus piece and the impact. We're Sharon and I probably, or I know I'm most concerned about is sales, occupancy tax, and meals taxes. Those total about $25 million in our budget. So the $216 million general fund, those are a significant part of that. So any impact there does have an impact on the county, and those are the areas that we'll be focused on making estimates and then watching what really occurs as we go forward in time. But I do want the community to know that in the budget process with the board, we will have a recommendation of things that we wouldn't spend, primarily these capital projects and hiring, because there are costly items. The board wants to leave them in the budget, subject to us coming back to the board and saying, okay, now we're ready to move forward because the revenue outlook is what we expected. Or if they want to remove them from the budget, that really is their discretion. And so we will work with them to determine whatever they feel is the best path forward for the county in terms of that. And school systems the same. Sharon had mentioned that earlier. They are a significant partner with us. I've had several conversations with our school superintendent just to let her know what we're doing. She says they are doing those same kinds of things on their side. And so we will continue to work in partnership on the schools to make sure that we're all sort of in this together, so to speak, and looking after the finances for the community and the community members. I would just tell folks to call us if they need us, right? They know how to we gave Renee's number at least one time. I would still send folks to Renee. So Renee, if you'll finish us up with that number before you get in, I guess, are you going to ask us questions today like you sometimes do?
I can, absolutely. So I guess my question would be, once this is all over and we are back to the new normal. Now, I think I've already asked you this one, Scott, so I'll be thinking of another one for you. So hold on. So Sharon, this is for you. Once we are back to the new normal, this is all over, what are you looking forward to the most?
What am I looking forward to the most?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good question. What is normal?
That's a good question.
I think everyone can just breathe a little lighter, after the COVID-19 is behind us a little bit. I enjoy a good challenge. I enjoy the people I work with. And so even though we're in tough times, we're all still smiling and doing the best we can. We've got great relationships and partnerships and employees, residents, everybody, and our vendors as well. So I just look forward to continuing those relationships and coming out of this with a good learning experience behind us.
Very good. Very good. So Scott, what's something that has surprised you about how we've worked or the world or whatever, but something over the last, say, month has surprised you?
Renee, the last month has been a bit of a blur. It's been a very unusual month. I will tell you, I've gotten better at conference calls and these video calls than I ever thought I would be. So that's probably a surprise. I have found it, I really like seeing our staff more than I thought. This has been strange. Talking on the phones is nice. It still accomplishes the work, but I do enjoy seeing people. And so we've had a lot less of that this past month. And then, not surprising, but continue to be impressed. To what Sharon said earlier, I talk to our employees. I see their attitude. Yes, they're concerned, but yes, they're happy to be at work. Yes, they want to serve the community. And to her point, I think all of them are making the best of the situation and doing the things and recognizing as we're passing out information and we're sharing, we don't have all the answers yet, but they're still here to serve the community and to do their best at that. And so I really want to commend our staff. Sharon's staff put this budget together much more remotely than they ever had thought possible. And that created just some issues of us working through those kind of challenges, but that's true in every department. We're still here to serve the community, and I continue to be not surprised, but impressed with our folks that are doing that and doing it very well. So we'll see what the world holds in the next month or two. I'm sort of like Sharon. I hope we'll be closer to normal, whatever that turns out to be.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you both very, very much for participating on this Zoom podcast video cast thing, whatever it is that we're doing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. Well, that wraps up this episode of This Week in James City County. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please take a moment to go online and subscribe. That way you will never miss an episode. Also, while you're there, we have a form, and we would love to hear from you. We'd love feedback, show ideas, questions. Please fill out the form and send it to us. And again, Scott had asked for me to repeat the telephone number. It's 757-272-3337 or 757-253-6605. But once we are done here, there are going to be all sorts of slides on the screen with all of the information that you need to know, with budget dates, the telephone number to call in your comments on the 14th. All of that will be following. So once again, thank you so much, and we will talk with you next week.